Assalamu alaikum. We are going to start with exercise 3. Yesterday we read exercise 2 and 1, and there was this mistake that I want to point out. Yesterday I wrote A over here instead of C, so I wrote A. So A was Connor and C was Umar. Okay. So the question was that suggests that a memory of while swimming might have been inaccurate. So it talks about the might thing. So it has to be Umar rather than Connor because Connor was just mentioning and talking about the photographs over here, but Umar was actually talking about the memory of the wild swimming that might have been inaccurate. He talked about that there were that he believed that he might get eaten or something with the sea creatures. Let's see once. So what was it? Mm. So Umar's mentioned something that my concern about what creatures might have been in the deep water beneath me. So that's a concern or something that he might had. So that's a memory of while swimming might have been inaccurate. So it was inaccurate. That should be C rather than A because when he mentioned about this, so he just said that it wasn't the impression and it wasn't about the wild swimming. It was about the temperature, freezing temperature. So although I know both of them are very close to each other, so it does make sense if I wrote it A earlier with the mistake, but it should have been Umar. That would have been a better accurate answer. So that's why I corrected it. For exercise 3, let's read this article now. Read the article about ways of reducing cars in cities and then complete the notes. So let's see what are the questions that we have to answer. So imagine you're going to give a talk to your classmates about reducing car use in cities. So this passage seems to be on the topic that we have to avoid using car due to certain reasons. So we have to make notes and we need to highlight those points that are talking about policies that have been introduced to reduce car use and what the writer has tried doing in order to reduce his own car use. So that's about the writer and this is about the policies that has been introduced. So we'll keep those 2 points in mind to answer the questions. Okay, starting here. Getting cars out of cities has become a target for countries around the world. Okay. Uh, Getting cars out of cities has become a target for countries around the world. The number of cars on a road has risen rapidly in recent years, causing traffic jams and increase in pollution and contributing to global warming. I decided to look into what has been done and what I could do personally. So that's exactly what we have to note down. We have to see what has been done and we have to write down what did he did personally. Okay. Um, One study carried out at Lund University in Sweden found that 75% of the methods introduced to cut car use were put in place by local city governments. Okay, so there was a study in this university. They found where they found 75% of the methods that were implemented using the local city government. The most successful cities have created policies which govern what people can or can't do while also encouraging people to change their behavior where possible. So that's like basic information regarding that. We don't have to note anything from this. One strategy that has been obvious that has an obvious impact on drivers is removing parking places. So this point is I think this point covers and let's use okay let me actually color them. So for the policies that have been introduced we are going to go for green. Okay, because the policies make sense when you're talking about policies. It is going to be green, and we are talking about what the writer has tried. We're going to keep it pink. Okay, so that's the writer that has tried. It's going to be pink, and what the policies, so these are going to be green, so it's easier to track. Okay, so one strategy that has an obvious impact on drivers is removing parking places. So removing parking places, that's a policy, so we're going to mark that. Over 10 years ago, urban designer Alison Lee was involved in a project in Melbourne, in Australia, which did justice. So we can even add this point, like in Melbourne, Australia, we can add this point as well. within this, but it's okay. We'll do that when we are writing it. So, despite complaints from some traders and residents, it has been a success. My city council recently proposed the same thing, and it made me think about what I could do. Okay, I realized there are plenty of alternatives to driving. Renting an e-bike was one thing I did to see how well I could manage without my car. So, renting an e-bike, that's what the person did. What's the name of the person? Okay, that's what the Robert did. So he rented an e-bike. Okay. So elsewhere, creating car-free zones. Creating car-free zones has led to a reduction of city center traffic. In Barcelona, Spain, there are areas in the city that can only be accessed by residents and emergency services in vehicles, along with bicycles and those on foot. So creating car-free zones is something that has been done as a policy. So we're going to highlight that. Okay. Charging drivers to enter parts of a city is another approach. Okay. You can also do that's also a policy. We are going to charge the drivers. In London, UK, traffic in the centre has been reduced by around 33%, which is a significant drop since this began in 2003. Other cities have done the same, but although this has clearly led to significant reductions in car use, traffic problems cannot be avoided completely while city design continues to favor the car use. Okay, so like they just mentioned about how the other cities have done it, but this has somehow reduced the car use. Traffic problems cannot just be vanished. One answer is better public transport, which some cities has already provided. Okay, so I think maybe that could be a point. But let's see. We can consider it. So let's yellow it to consider it. Another option I was interested in. So that's about the Robert. So that is going to be pink that he is trying to share a car. Okay, so that's another point. A large medical center in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, reported a 20 to 25% reduction in employee car journeys by introducing parking charges. So, introducing parking charges, that's one of a policy outside the workplace, but we know people need encouragement as well as rules. One widely explored idea is making a personal travel plan. Personal travel plan. I wasn't interested. Okay, so that's an idea. So I decided to give. Okay, so I decided to give it a go. That means Robert decided to give it a go, or the writer decided to give it a go. That means it is going to be one of our pinkies. So personal travel plan. How many pinkies do we have? We have rent a bike, share a car, personal travel plan. I think that's we're going good. I wasn't entirely sure what this meant, so I decided to give it a go. So Robert decided that probably a personal travel plan would be a better idea to reduce the car usage. Basically, it involves getting personalized advice on the best ways to avoid car use in the city, and I found it really helpful. Mobile phone technology offers another way to limit car use. When I was living in Bologna, Italy, I came across an example of this. It involved downloading an app that records environmentally friendly tips around city. I did this. Robert did this. So we're going to do that as well. So we are going to download an app and found it really motivating. Initial results show that 73% of people used their car less, although the number of car trips or distances traveled by car were not recorded. So the overall effectiveness of the app is unclear. So if you notice, we completed the passage. And how many points were we supposed to make? 4 for this one and 3 for this one. Okay. And we actually wrote 1, 2, 3, 4, and technically 5 as well. But let's skip this because we have already made 4 of them. And then we have 3 writer things. So we also wrote 4 of them. So I think we can skip one of these: renting an e-bike, sharing a car, personal travel plan, downloading an app. I think we can skip this one, personal travel plan, or or we can skip this because downloading an app will not. It is just motivating. It's not really helping in that way. We can you can skip any of these actually. Okay. So actually, I'm just going to write all four of them for each. So let's just write them down. So policies that have been introduced to car use reduce the car usage. It's removing parking places that we are talking about in Melbourne, Australia. So let's write that. Removing parking places that is in, for example, in Melbourne, Australia. Australia. The next point, if I remember correctly, what was it? Creating car-free zones, and that is in Barcelona in Spain. That has been worked, so we're going to write that. And one more thing. Wait, I was only accessible to the residents, emergency services, vehicles. So we can also add this point. Creating creating car-free zones in Barcelona, Spain, which was accessible to only residents, emergency services. Actually, just skip that. Creating car-free zones in Barcelona, Spain. That's it. Okay. The next point was charging drivers, and that was in London, UK, and 33% was reduced. Okay. So charging, charging drivers to enter parts of parts of a city. Oh God. Okay. Of a city in London, UK, reducing the traffic by 33%. If you want to avoid this point, you can do that even if you just try charging drivers to enter the part of city, that's sufficient as well. And lastly, it was about the parking charges, reducing parking charges. Where were the parking charges were introduced? They were introduced outside the workplace. Okay. And that was in Rotterdam and in Netherlands. Okay. Introducing parking charges outside workplaces in Rotterdam, Netherlands. Okay. So that's what we are going to write for the policies. For the writer, what the writer has been doing, firstly, it was renting an e-bike and then sharing a car. Okay. Renting an e-bike to manage without a car, sharing a car with friends in his area. And what was the next one? Personal travel plan, making a personal travel plan, avoid car usage. And then let's write another one for the mobile app. So, okay, that was in Bologna, Italy. Using a mobile app in Bologna, Italy to record environmental friendly trips. Okay, so here's the question that will be answered, and we're done with this. Moving on to exercise 4 now. Read the article about a research laboratory called Toddler Lab, then answer the questions. Okay, let's see what are the questions. Okay, these are the questions that will be answered after reading the content. So let's do that first. Toddler Lab. Science reporter Carolina Baker visits a laboratory where psychologists study toddlers, children who are about 2 to 3 years old, and young children. So this is a science reporter, Carolina Baker, who is visiting a laboratory where psychologists are studying kids. Okay, I'm visiting Toddler Lab, a multi-million pound laboratory that has been set up at the University of London. In front of me is Serena. She is a perfectly ordinary looking 6-year-old girl, apart from the fact that there's a cap on her head with wires sticking out of it. So, what I am imagining right now is that this is a girl, let's say, okay, so that she has a ponytail and then she has some sort of cap in front of her, and then there's like wires coming out of it, something like that. Okay, so that's what I'm imagining. There's nothing wrong with her at all. She's simply part of a group of children who have been studied by a team of researchers since the age of 3. So now she is 6 years old. Rather than studying intelligence, they are actually interested in investigating how the brains of very young children develop. So they're not studying intelligence, they're studying how they develop, so the way they develop. In terms of their brains, there is no doubt that young children are extraordinary. Okay, the change between 2 and 5 years of age is pretty spectacular. There's a lot going on in terms of brain development. Understandable, said Natasha Kirkham, a professor of developmental psychology who I met at the lab. She went on to tell me that babies' brains have been extensively studied. This is typically done by recording their eye movement. So they record how their eye moves, like how curious they are, how where they are looking at actually, and the electrical activity in their brains. So they have this wired caps for a reason, so that they can see how the electrical activity works inside their brain. That looks like a heartbeat, but let's that's also a peaks, that shows peaks. However, opportunities to study young children's brain have been more limited because until fairly recently they needed to be attached to a machine for the technology to work. So the kids or children have to be attached to some technology. So that means they cannot, freely move around, which is very hard to stop young children to sit in one place, which is tricky as it isn't part of a young children's natural behavior to sit still for long periods of time. So that's hard. The development of new wearable technology is now enabling researchers to extend their studies. So as the Serena was similarly how Serena was wearing this cap, this is nice because they can move around and they can also be recorded simultaneously. Moving on, I observe as one of the members of the team gives Serena a pair of bright pink gloves. So now Serena has, apart from the cap she was wearing, that has wires out of it. Okay. Apart from that, now Serena looks bad, वैसे. Okay. So apart from that, she was given a pair of bright pink gloves. Okay. Which are covered in bits of silver colored reflective material. So these are covered with silver colored reflective material. These allow special cameras on the ceiling to follow the exact position of Serena's hand as she completes various tasks. So on the ceiling, there are some certain sort of cameras that are attached to see how what is the motion of her hands and how they're moving for a particular task. She carefully puts them on, then heads towards the table which has been set up to look like it's a preschool classroom covered with several boxes and a computer screen. One of Serena's tasks is to build a house using plastic blocks of all colors, shapes, and sizes. She is shown a recording in which an adult quickly demonstrates how to press a button to release a range of blocks from the boxes and then use them to build a house. Serena is told to copy what she has observed, and she does just that, producing a solid, colorful house with a garden full of plastic flowers. I ask her if she would like to live in this house, and she promptly tells me what each room is. She clearly has a sense of imagination. The last time Serena performed this task, although she won't recall it, the result was very different. 3-year-olds are much less able to understand a set of complex commands, and it is this ability that the studies focused on understanding more clearly. So 6-year-old can do much better than 3-year-old. It's been a really fascinating visit. Just before I leave, I asked Serena to tell me what she thinks about the toddler lab. So she says, I like coming here to play all the different games, she says, while she runs around the room. And as she does so, she whispers to me, I would like to be a scientist when I'm older. So she really enjoys what's been happening to her and she's more curious about that. Okay, let's move on to the questions now. Okay, for each question, choose the correct answer A, B, or C, put a tick in the appropriate box. Okay, in the first paragraph, the writer suggests that Serena is interesting. because she's unusually clever, she's wearing a special device, or she's the only participant in an experiment. Okay, so this is not the thing because that's not how she described, and she did not describe this either. Let's see what she mentioned about wearing a special device. So, in the first paragraph, she was perfectly ordinary looking, apart from the fact that there is a cap on her head, wire sticking out of it. So, the writer she did describe Serena as interesting because she's wearing a cap with wires, which is a special device used in the research. So, it is going to be B. What information does the writer give in the second paragraph? What has been learned from studying baby's brain? How baby's brain differ from those of young children? Why young children's brain have been harder to study? So in the second paragraph, if you look at it, they have usually mentioned about why young children's brain have been harder to study when they're talking about how they cannot sit still. So this paragraph actually explains that thing that studying young children's brain has been limited because they needed to be attached to some machine and oh sorry, not this one, not this one, this point. Okay, so they have that because they needed to be attached to some particular machine, and it's hard for them to move around, which is not natural for young children to have. So that's why. Okay, why is Serena asked to wear the gloves? That was all to record her movements. That was very obvious. So, because they also mentioned about ceilings, so the cameras can follow the exact position of Serena's hands. Serena begins her house building task by describing her design, watching a short video, choosing what material to use. That was watching a short video of an adult that was demonstrating how to build the house before she starts the task. For question number 14, Serena's house building task is part of research into how young children develop creativity, follow instructions, remember details. That was all about follow instructions because she was supposed to follow how the video was done. So that's entirely focused on the understanding of how young children process and how they follow a particular complex commands. The phrase as she does so in the paragraph refers to speaking quietly, moving rapidly, visiting the lab. So you must have been confused between these two because obviously as she does so does it is not referring to visiting the lab. Let's see the last line again. So it says, I like coming here to play all the different games, she says, while she runs around the room. And as she does so what? As she runs around the room, as she moves rapidly. Because there was Serena, this phrase actually refers to this Serena who's running around the room while speaking to the Robert or the writer. Okay, so here are exercise 4 ends, and we're going to continue exercise 5 in the next class.